Welcome to How Would Coaching Help Me? Our goal with this series is to introduce professional coaching to you and do so in a very practical way so that you can decide how you could benefit from coaching. We will hear from two coaches who coach in areas in which they were challenged during their corporate career and who in turn now help professionals facing similar situations. We kept this video to 30 minutes. Please capture your questions. At the end of this video, we will provide a link for you to submit your comments.
Well, welcome everybody. My name is Joerg Hermans and I'm an executive coach. Today, I would also like to welcome my co-host and colleague, Lynn Donaldson. Lynn, as an executive coach, you help your clients move into and stay at peak performance and achieve their professional as well as their personal goals. What you do more specifically is they face situations, right? And you coach them through the situations they're currently facing and on to success, helping them find out what is holding them back or what is derailing them. Lynn, you also and have been a serial entrepreneur who came from corporate, similar to myself, and that experience is very helpful in this setting as you coach professionals at all levels and across many, many industries, Lynn. Thank you again, Linda, for making the time today.
Thank you, Joerg, and it's a pleasure working with you again. So, Joerg, you've been helping professionals to prepare for or who are in transition and face the bump in the road. I understand you help them clarify their goals and develop strategies on how to move forward. And your expertise in this area of professional transitions, especially transitions from technical to people leadership, new geographies, and finally transitions into new companies. I think that adequately describes what you do.
It certainly does. And transitions usually are, positive, right? It's a great recognition of the work you've done in the past in your previous role. At the same time, it is important to realize that you are in a new role. There's a definition for the word new, and that is let go of the old and focus on the new. There's new responsibilities, often more responsibilities. And therefore, what this requires is a behavior according to the old saying. Basically, you need to learn new skills and let go of old skills. So what got you here won't necessarily get you there. Now, let's be practical. One of my first clients, let's call her Linda, is a good example. In her mind, very similar to many other colleagues, the promotion that she received was a confirmation of the very technical skill set she had been building and demonstrating and putting to use for years as a subject matter expert, an individual contributor. Now, success in her new role for Linda meant that you had to now transition from a subject matter expert to building a large team of subject matter experts. And it sounds fairly closely related, and it may be interpreted as an extension of your old role, but it is not. It's a very different role requiring different skills. And again, I repeat it, it's a perfect example of what got you here won't necessarily get you there, although you may think so. Linda's challenge, again, a common challenge, was to let go of some of her previous expertise and the very behaviors that led to her promotion. During those first 3 months, it was very clear that she struggled. She felt exposed, uncomfortable, because having to learn again was in a visible role was something that she did not expect, right? So what you saw in her case were all the symptoms of a barrier we call the fear of failure. Being in a transition or when transitioning to a new role, it is critical to truly leave your old role behind. Cut the ties. When you do that, by definition, you're much more focused on understanding the new role because you no longer leverage your experience or your experiences that often can turn into baggage in the new role. You just focus on the new role and understand what it requires. What does success look like? And in Linda's case, a big learning was that there's a learning curve that is expected and involved for success in her new role.
Yeah, Linda seemed to demonstrate a really common blind spot of assuming her new role was basically an extension of her old role. And like you said, she had to leave it behind. And coaching would better prepare Linda for her new role and help her achieve earlier and better results. And that's where you came in. So I'm glad she got some support. So, Jörg, we both work with executives, but in slightly different situations. And as coaches, our approaches are always tailored to our clients' needs. And Jörg, you just talked about the challenge of a successful transition. But now I'm going to move on to talk about how I support executives when an event or situation can derail them. And what I mean is an event or a single incident. And this can be an email, that email from your boss that says, we need to talk, and I've set up time. Or you overhear a conversation, or there's a conflict that can trigger a memory from the past that really negatively affects the professional's career and personal life. And they can be temporarily derailed by it and have difficulty overcoming this on their own. So that's where I come in. And at times it's not really clear what the root cause is. They may think it's this, but it's actually something else. And that's where we help clients. So the focus of what I do is to identify what really is holding that person back from success. It could be that incident. It could be something related to when they were a child or when a previous manager, or in a situation where they're not collaborating with their colleagues because of something that happened with previous colleagues. And so they're in a fear of being betrayed. So one of my clients, Jane, had a challenge with an employee who accused her of being unfair and singling her out. And this really triggered a series of thoughts emanating from my client's own limiting beliefs and past experiences that caused emotional distress at such a high level that she was barely functioning in her role. And it was actually my client's manager who reached out for me to coach Jane.
So Lynn, very, very interesting, right? Because what you see in those situations often is, in spite of the fact that your clients, Jane in this case, they want to help themselves, they continue to revisit whatever it was, right? It's like a holding pattern on a plane. You want to get out of it, but you just can't. And it takes time and it takes dedication. That's where coaches come in. So Lynn, how did you end up helping Jane?
Yeah, so that loop, the psychocybernetic loop, it's really hard to get out of that. And so it takes quite a while, as you said. So over 10 sessions over a period of 6 months, we really sort of delved into the triggers that were evoking this situation. And our goal really was to identify exactly which trigger was causing the most harm, because there can often be a couple of triggers that are happening at the same time. And so we had to examine previous events and understand the limiting beliefs and the resulting actions that arose from those events. And so just let me explain a little bit. The limiting beliefs were causing so much concern for Jane that she couldn't really function, but the company really believed in Jane. And so they wanted to provide this coaching because Jane had lost belief in herself. She was so concentrated on the stories that were going round and round in her head in this cybernetic loop that she couldn't see the situation for what it was, the fact. And so during each session, we had to unpack the limiting belief and explore its origins so that Jane could see how these stories were really impacting her professionally and personally.
Yeah, it's perhaps a comment and a question. The comment is, what you hear at times is, we say it at times, well, give Jane some time, this will take care of itself. And while the thought may go away, the key here is that she needs to get closure on that topic, because if you don't get closure on a certain topic, there will be the unfortunate event in the future when that thought comes up again in the most inopportune situations. You don't want that for yourself. The company certainly doesn't want that when there's an important project. Hence, have a coach come in, work on the identification of what the barrier is, and then help the client get closure on it. So she's comfortable talking about whatever the barrier is because she has overcome it. She's learned to manage it, right? So that was the comment. The question was, you mentioned the term limiting belief a couple of times now. for the audience, we're both very familiar with this. Can you just put this into context a little bit more in terms of what that is, please, Lynn?
Sure. A limiting belief is something that often happened, we developed when we were younger, and it was a decision we made at the time. Something happened, and then we made a decision at that time, and it's a belief that we formed that now can hold us back. And I'll give you an instance. There was a time when people believed that the 4-minute mile could not be broken. Nobody could break it. It was unbreakable. And then Roger Bannister in 1954 believed he could. He changed that decision. He changed from a limiting belief that nobody could do it into a decision that he could actually do it. And he broke the 1-minute mile, and now it is being broken by over 1,700 athletes. That's just simply because he believed he could. He broke that limiting belief. By using a tool we call the belief transformation matrix, we set them out what the belief was that's holding them back. Then we set out a new belief, and then we start stacking the evidence. And this is exactly what we did with Jane. She saw what was holding her back. What was that belief that was holding her back? And it could be a common belief, which is I'm not good enough, I can't do this, I'm too old, I'm too young. Those are all limiting beliefs that hold us back. But she was able to see what was holding her back, come up with a new decision, come up with the evidence that showed that she actually was good enough and she could do this. And the result for her was that she was able to move forward. The result for the company was that they ended up with an employee who is now enthusiastic and engaged at all levels. And Jane, since that situation, and she was able to resolve it, she's been promoted not once but twice, and she is just soaring. And that's when we see that our coaching really helps people and really works. So back to Linda, Joerg, what really helped her? We've heard a little bit about her. Tell us what really helped her and how you approached it.
Linda was an interesting one because she was very, very strongly committed to overcome this challenge. She knew what it was, she just didn't know how to approach it and how to help herself ultimately, right? When people change behaviors, most go through 3 phases. One is becoming aware of the challenge that you have and understanding what the barrier is that you're trying to address. 2 is a transformation where you let go of your old behaviors because your mindset has shifted, you have a new perspective, and you're learning new skills, right? So you're a little bit out at sea where you no longer see the port and you don't see the new island just yet. And so that's the transformation phase. And then ultimately the renewal phase. And I'll talk about this in a minute. So first is awareness, getting a client to understand that there is a bump in the road. It can be overcome. It is very solvable. But if you don't address it, it will impact your performance. Most of my clients have come to terms with that. They're committed to doing this, right? But you need to reach the point where not only do you see it, but others are seeing it too. So there's a willingness to help you, right? But first of all, awareness, you have an issue, you want to overcome it, you see it. The second is then, second phase then starts with the question, what is the barrier? Understanding the barrier. In Linda's case, it is what makes you continue be a subject matter expert when you should be the architect of a new team of subject matter experts, right? That is the beginning of the transformation phase. Now, in Linda's case, it was the fear of failure in the new role. She continued to be an individual contributing subject matter expert to protect herself. It's a very common mechanism, the protection mechanism, because if you protect, you can't get hurt. Once she let go of her old role, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of things start to happen. And also that happened in her case. Her perspective started to change. She realized, in fact, that she needed to acquire knowledge and expertise in an area new to her, and that was building and leading teams. Well, as we all know, that gets uncomfortable, right? And there's also some risk in terms of, are you going to be able to do this, yes or no? What we did with her is we worked through times when she became a successful individual subject matter expert. How did she go about it? What were the learnings? for her then to take those learnings and apply them to this current transformation and transition. The final phase, then phase 3, is the renewal phase. That is all about consistency and demonstrating those new behaviors, those new skills in more and more complex situations. And as the coaching will soon end, basically working with the client to establish a framework for continued development and support once the coaching has ended. So that's my little summary here. What about your client, Lynn? How did she change her mindset?
So as I've talked about the 10 sessions, and we delved really deep into the triggers that were causing the challenges, Jane worked through really what was holding her back, and the ability to recognize those triggers as they came along. And we used that belief transformation tool, as I've explained, to put the old belief, the new belief, and then stack the evidence. But what we did, we also ignited the reticular activating system. The reticular activating system is at the base of your brain, and it's the function to filter between your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. It filters the millions of pieces of data that the brain is processing per second, and only allows through those that are of importance and interest to the conscious mind. So I'll give you an example. Have you ever wanted a blue car, a blue Nissan? And you've decided that you want a blue Nissan, and then every time you go out, you see blue Nissans, and you didn't realize how many blue Nissans there were in your area, your neighborhood, but suddenly you're seeing them. And this is because your reticular activating system says, that's what's important to you. I'm going to show you wherever you go these importance. And the same thing works with coaching. What we did was we invoked the reticular activating system with the new decision and the evidence that we were stacking for her to show that she actually, instead of not being good enough, how good she actually was. And like you said, I think you talked about, Linda, about going back into the past where she used times when she'd been the subject matter expert and it worked for her. What we did was we took that and then used the times when Jane had been very successful with her employees or her staff to move them forward, and showed how good Jane actually was in her role, so that the reticular activating system just kept bringing forward evidence of how good she was and how she'd been successful. And so we really use the combination of the tool and then the reticular activating system to bring forth the new decision and a new empowerment in that person so that they can move forward. So whatever was triggering them in the past is gone, or they notice it and they stop it. It's gone now, so that they can keep moving forward.
The underlying science, and thank you for that excursion, is really interesting. And it's nothing unique. It's the same system or the same scientific process that helps us learn a foreign language, right? Because we take the class twice or 3 times a week. So the brain registers there's an activity around something new. It happens to be a foreign language that is important. So it prioritizes that particular capability, and that then becomes the new normal for you because your brain rewired to basically accommodate that focus. Really interesting. Well, so now we've covered how coaching works, the process, but also an excursion into the underlying science. Thank you for that, Lynn, and filled it in with specific examples. Every coaching engagement ends, right? That day comes. At the same time, the clients and the sponsors of the clients in the corporate world, they want to see that growth continue, right? And the client to continue to develop. So what helps your clients, Lynn, to sustain their transformation and to continue their development?
Well, we give them the tools and techniques that we've used on them and help them, kind of teach them to almost self-coach, to recognize when a limiting belief is popping in, and then use the trick belief transformation tool and invoke the reticular activating system. But we also check in them on them a regular basis. And sometimes clients will come back because they may have got rid of one trigger, but then an event can trigger something completely different. and they don't know how to work through it on their own. So they'll come back to us. But on the whole, we just follow up with clients and make sure that they're still doing well and that if they need any more support. But what about you? Yeah, how do you help your clients when a coaching engagement is concluded?
Yeah, I think the follow-up is it's a critical element. The time when I start addressing this is during this third stage, right? When the client is renewing. What I have found is that there are a few critical elements. One is accountability, continued accountability. So how can we help the client hold him or herself accountable when we're not there, when there are no appointments? What continued feedback, or how can they benefit from continued feedback from peers or from someone outside the organization? And three, who follows up with them in terms of, which connects back to the accountability, right? If there's a date on the calendar when you reconnect, as you mentioned earlier, that also helps. So to me, it's those three things coming together. And what I work on with my clients is basically a structured 12 months plan created by the client, supported by myself, that helps sustain that growth after the formal coaching engagement has ended. So you mentioned at the very beginning that, Lynn, that you have focus on a very particular area, and that is peak performance, basically. Staying at peak performance, but when you're off or when you're derailed, bringing him or her back, or them back on peak performance. How did you select that particular area of focus, Lynn?
Well, I would say most coaches pick their area of particular focus because of what actually happened to them. And in my case, this was exactly what happened. So my business and I were derailed by a major event that nearly caused me to lose everything. And I really did not know what to do. I was very fortunate, and the universe led me to a program that was where mindset coaching played a very big role. And I learned from my coach how to get over the triggers, overcome the triggers, make the new decisions, and move forward. And that's why I now use the same techniques on other people, on the people I coach. And you mentioned that sometimes our coach that coached us is still around. And yes, my coach, the very first person who coached me, is still around and helps me tremendously. But as a corporate employee, when I worked in corporate, I could sometimes allow myself to be triggered by events. And that was often to my detriment because I could be derailed for hours. Something would happen and I would go into a disempowered mode, which is low energy, low activity, and for 3 or 4 hours, or even a couple of days, depending on what the situation was. And at that point, you're not at peak performance, you're not doing your job. You're focused on the stories in your head and what's actually happened. And it was through that experience and coaching my corporate clients that I realized that that's how I wanted to help people. And this became much more prominent during the pandemic, when I was working with some of my clients in product launch, and they suddenly couldn't get out to see their potential customers. And I realized that I wasn't alone, that there are many executives who something happens. In this case, it was fairly big. The pandemic happened. But not only were they struggling with what everybody else was, they were actually struggling with the fact that they had to launch a product and couldn't get out to see anybody. So it was derailing them. So I went in to coach the leadership team to keep them at a peak performance while they were doing the product launch and trying to get through the product launch as well as they possibly could in the situation. So I found that coaching my clients helps them succeed faster with coaching than it does on their own. But let's think about yourself, Joerg. What about you? Why did you get into this particular niche?
Yeah, it took a while for me to find this spot, but now for a number of years, I understand what the foundation is and what the triggers were. And that is, personally, I've gone through many transitions. Some were easy, and those are hard to remember because they were easy, right? But you do remember the ones that are tough, where you struggle. At the same time, it was the most challenging ones. For instance, transitioning from operations to people management, from working with 5 people to now leading 50 people in no time, moving from a large company to a small company, or on the personal side, for work, moving my family around the globe for my own benefit, so to say. Those were tough ones because there are things that come up, personal or professional, that you do not anticipate, right? And it's, again, those situations when you don't anticipate, where you're truly blindsided, that the best in you comes out, but temporarily also the worst in you comes out. And that's where I learned the most, where I also benefited from a coach and realized over time that this is not just me. This is a very common challenge for many people that are in transitions. Why don't I help them? And that's how I decided to help them, in terms of bringing in my own experience, but combining that with a proven coaching approach that helps the clients prepare and manage their own specific situation, Lynn.
Mm. Yeah, and it's our desire to help others not go through what we've been through in the same way, and see if we can help them get through more smoothly. I think that's why most coaches do what they do.
Yeah, I mean, you do want them, not that we're offering everything on a plate. There is work involved here, and deep work, right? But to your point, I think our benefit is that we know what the approach is to get closure on some of these things, and most important, not only get closure, but move forward. That's what it's all about, moving forward.
Yeah. So let's wrap up with the 3 common questions that we hear, and some of the answers. So the first question is, who benefits from coaching? Well, anyone at any level of their professional career can benefit from coaching. And you've heard from both of us how you can be helped, but you have to be open to coaching. And our clients need to grow and want to grow and progress in their own personal and professional lives. The second question is, how does it work? And you and I, Joerg, are both focused on our coaching goals. And during our sessions, we guide the challenges, guide our clients through the challenges, and help them look inside themselves to look at different perspectives and possibilities. And after every session, there are assignments that you can put into practice for the concepts that you've learned. And then we can check in on the next session what the progress has made. And of course, the last question, or one of the third questions, is, are there critical success factors? And the answer to that is yes. And the main one is a willingness to learn. But then, of course, chemistry is very important between the coach and the client. If that chemistry is not there, that person's not going to open up, and we won't be able to see the triggers that are causing the problems. And then, of course, you've mentioned it before, accountability by the client. They have to be accountable, because it is hard work. It's not easy, but we just guide and coach you through the process. So what are your perspectives then, Joerg? Is there anything you would like to add to that?
Maybe an extension of what you said. I mean, I think the clients need to be driven by the need and the want to move forward, right? And to move forward in a very practical way. If they see progress on that by going deep and having some of these more inner challenges addressed and ultimately resolved, that is a key. So again, moving forward, the willingness to move forward, and in fact, the desire to move forward, moving forward in a very practical way with exercises after each session. And then also, and most importantly, I think, with measurable results that are sustainable moving forward, Lynn.
Today, we have set out to introduce you to professional coaching in a practical way, so that you could decide how you could benefit from it. Lynn and Joerg provided examples of their work, and at the same time realize there is only so much you can cover in 29 minutes. Please click on the Google form to submit any questions that you may have. If you'd like to learn more, Lynn and Joerg can be reached separately by clicking their emails below. We will continue this series during the last week of November 2023. Thank you for your time.